Sturt. The question is that this bill now be read a second time, and I call the member for Wentworth.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome the opportunity to speak on this bill. This legislation, I believe, is perfectly unobjectionable. It brings the statutory office holders who lead 4 Commonwealth agencies into line with other government organisations by reducing their maximum term of appointment from 7 to 5 years and adding grounds for suspension or termination of office holders similar to what exists for other positions. But the question I really have for government is, in a time where inflation is high, where productivity is in the doldrums, where house prices mean that young people are struggling to get onto the housing market and achieve the same outcomes as their parents, when social cohesion is under pressure, when trust in government is at a low ebb, and when Australia's clean energy transition is happening more slowly than we would like, is this legislation really the best use of our parliamentary time? Is tweaking the employment contracts of 4 government-appointed officials really an issue that is on the top of the government's precious parliamentary agenda? I genuinely hope that this sort of bill would come in a big omnibus bill of uncontentious pieces of legislation that we could push through Parliament and focus on more important things. But in this case, it hasn't. Look, and I guess this is the question I really ask the government in relation to this. Where is the ambition? And how is it reflected in the legislative agenda? Every week, the government, we have a crossbench briefing by the government on legislation for the coming weeks. They cancelled it tonight because there was only one bill to bring forward, and it was a very minimal one. So again, we're going to sit 6 weeks within 9 weeks. Where is the legislative agenda that really justifies this? There is important work to be done. For instance, the government has indicated, I think very rightly, that there's a significant deregulation agenda that is required. But in which case, where's that legislation? They have taken step forwards in terms of things like the Tell Us Once policy, but there is much, much, much more work to do. This is a sort of legislation I think people expect us to be dealing with in the Parliament. Or whistleblower protections. Those are long overdue. Or gambling reform, or protections for LGBTQ plus students and teachers so that they can't be fired or expelled because of who they love, because of getting divorced or having a child out of wedlock, or about forcing companies to allow you to opt out of social media algorithms, or dealing with the CFMEU and the impact that has had on government procurement, on the $15 billion worth of expected impact in Victoria, of which probably $2 billion of which is federal money. So that really is the question here, that I respect this piece of legislation. I have no problems with it as a piece of legislation. But the country expects us to be doing much more on issues that matter to them. The government's legislative agenda is absolutely surprisingly light, given what are the challenges facing our country. And so that is really the question to the government. Is this the ambition that you should be approaching, given you have a supermajority in the House, you have 2 different and achievable pathways through the Senate? Surely that there is more that the government can do with its legislative agenda than this. Thank you.
Thank the member.